Hope everybody's having a great day. If you guys have any questions, always make sure to pop them into the questions menu. We try to get to them as much as we can. If you guys have any suggestions that, things that you want on future recordings, I'm happy to kind of modify my schedule. I've done that a couple times now to touch on some pressing issues that are happening. I'm happy to do that. No questions, nothing pressing. No fires to put out right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about job costing, the basics. We're going in a little bit of reverse order because we talked about issue tickets the other day. That was somebody had requested that. I'm Marjorie. I'm going to be leading our webinar today. So as always have fun doing these. Reminder, I do get a lot of feedback that I talk too fast sometimes. So if you need to go back and watch any of these videos, we do have them on YouTube, youtube.com/Fourlane. They're usually up the day after, or if you've missed any of the videos in this series, there's just a ton of videos there. Also, we do have the Fourlane QuickBooks Enterprise Facebook group. So I've been seeing some more activity in there lately in case anybody wants to join that. I just also wanted to mention that we do have the on-demand support. Somebody brought this up in a webinar 2 weeks ago, I think, and I just thought I'd mention that we have it. You have your IT person. You don't call Microsoft support, you call your IT person. You don't have to call QuickBooks support, you can call Fourlane. So just a reminder that we have that if you guys need information on that. Intuit support has been fun recently. Okay, so let's get into job costing. I'm going to keep this slide up here for a minute so that you guys can read through it. I know I hate slide decks. I'm not really great at them. That's why I usually only have one slide that I modify every week. But we can go ahead and talk about what does job costing mean. So job costing, right, it means a ton of things to people. When a customer comes to us and they say, I need to do job costing. Now it's kind of like when somebody comes to us and says, I need an accountant. Do you need it for tax? Do you need it for audit? Do you need it for, forensic accounting? Do you need it for managerial reporting? Like, what are we talking here? So it's a similar thing where we usually need to clarify, what exactly are you talking about? What are you needing to do? Now, most of the time when it comes to job costing, what people are asking for is some kind of report, right? Some result that they want. That is multiple transactions, different workflows, getting to some kind of result. So it's usually a report. QuickBooks Enterprise was built for the construction industry, right? So it has some pretty powerful reports when it comes to job costing for most people. Now, sometimes we've heard a lot of different things. We have a ton of clients, so what job costing means to them. So we're going to talk about projects today, both internal and external. We're going to talk about tracking budgets of projects, the expense, the labor, and the revenue, how that works out. All right, so let's dive in product. So first things first, projects. So QuickBooks Online has a term called projects, which is different than jobs. So they say it's just the way that it's reported. It's actually maintained on the same list. It's like a different checkbox, basically, on the job card. But what is a project? What is a job? So we have people. I'm just going to throw out some examples of things that I've seen people do before. We have people who track internal projects. So this does not have to be just for the construction industry. We have people who track internal projects. They're building a building. They need to track it. They're doing a remodel. They need to track it. They have a new department that they're setting up. They have a new product line that they're setting up. They have a different rev for a product that they sell all the time that they want to track expenses against that for R&D purposes, right? So this does not have to just be construction. It's going to be used all over the place. For external things I've seen a lot of times, obviously I've seen it for customer projects or customer jobs. I've seen it for phases, to set up a different project for each phase or a different job for each phase of a project. I've also seen things where our clients don't actually track customers in their customer list, or maybe they do, but we use it for things like events, right? So we hold, here at Fourlane, we do an annual all-team event. Usually it's in person. Last couple of years we haven't been doing that. We had hybrid this year, in person and virtual, but we want to track the expenses tied to the event. Okay, there will be no revenue for that, just expenses. I want to track it. Where I've seen other clients, we have nonprofits who track, they have an annual conference every year that does have revenue sources and they have expenses tied to it, and they'll set it up as a job. I know a lot of people think to set that up as a class, right? But they're not actually tracking each individual customer who contributes to the conference. They're just tracking overall revenue for the conference and overall expenses for the conference. So we set it up as a job instead. We don't have to use a class for that. So just some ideas. I'd love to hear if anybody wants to share how they use jobs in QuickBooks, if anybody does. If you have any you want to share with us, I'd love to see that. So how do we set up a job? So we come into customer lists. So jobs inside of QuickBooks Enterprise are maintained at the customer level. Okay. So they are basically a sub-customer. We've seen a sub-account in the chart of accounts. Jobs are sub-customers. And similar to the chart of accounts or items list, you can go up to 5 levels deep. So I can have Heather Campbell. I can have Heather Campbell's house, right? Under Heather Campbell's house, let's say we have kitchen remodel. So I can drop it down another level. Under kitchen remodel, we have, I don't know, island remodel. I mean, I hope you don't get this detailed because that'd be a lot. But you can go up to 5 levels deep. We do say if you are going 5 levels deep, like let's have a conversation, because there probably are other ways that we can, via customer type or custom fields, that we can get to the details that you're needing to get to, because that's quite a bit to track. But you can see you can go up to 5 levels deep. Now, what's the purpose of setting it up at each of these different levels? Is that if I did have, and keep it right as underneath there, I could run reports at new construction 3 level, show me profitability at new construction 3 level, show me estimate versus actual at new construction 3 level. I could run it at the house level, and I could run it for the Heather Campbell level, so for all jobs. Okay. So again, where we've seen this in other industries, it makes perfect sense in construction. Totally get it, right? That makes everybody sees and understands that. I don't know what is going on with my list here. But where I've seen it in other places, like in wholesale manufacturing, what I'll see is Costco, right? And then Costco, we have each individual store location. Sometimes we'll have regions, so region of stores, because we have to bill by the region, not by the store. And so we'll have each individual store underneath that region. Okay. And you say, well, profitability on an inventory parts. I mean, hopefully we have our margins pretty fixed in there, but sometimes we don't, because we play around with pricing sometimes, like bulk orders and things like that. Also, though, by putting those different stores in there, you can track things like when your sales reps go on site to take them out to lunch. So you can allocate that lunch to a customer. We can see, store in Austin, Texas, we visit them and spend $5,000 a year on schmoozing them, and they don't even bring in as much as the store in Dallas, and we don't even visit them at all. So you can track additional things using these features. It doesn't just have to be about construction. All right, so setting up a new job, how we do that. So you highlight on the header, right? So if I was going to set up, I want it to be under Heather Campbell. I come in here, in here, and I say add job. If I wanted to add it under house, new construction, I have to highlight there, add job, right? Or right click and say, you know, add job right there. Okay. The other way that you can do this is on the transaction itself. So we're going to talk about estimates next. On the transaction itself, the way that you see the levels is by a colon in there, right? So Heather Campbell, colon, house new construction 2. So if I wanted to add another job in here, I put in a colon, job 1. Tells me it's not on this list. I'm just going to do quick add for now. And then it'll add that as a sub underneath. So that colon is what tells it it's a sub underneath. When you set up a job, only thing different on the job level than a customer, you cannot have sales tax set up at the job level. So sales tax is maintained at the customer level. And then you get this job info tab, which has some more information. Job description, type, which we can use this to filter out reports, status, which we can use to filter out reports, start date, end date, etc. So just details we can use for reporting if we need to. Okay. All right, so that's how to set up a job. Now, when we talk about job costing, usually, again, people are trying to get to a report. And usually, that report is trying to get to estimate versus actual. What did we quote the customer? What did we say we're going to do? And what have we actually done? So that's what most of the time we hear around this. That's what I'm going to be talking about here. So all of this starts, right? I have the ability in QuickBooks to come in and create a budget. And I can create a new budget and choose job as the criteria. So I see people do this quite frequently. However, when you choose customer job as a criteria, it's going to do a budget for that customer job, but it's going to do it based on your chart of accounts, right? And that's not always the best way, because really most jobs are task-driven, materials-driven, labor, subcontractor, right? So they're driven by something, and that something doesn't always tie to our GL account codes. So instead of going in and setting up a budget for the job, which seems very natural, most other systems call it a budget by job. What we actually do is we set up an estimate, okay? When you set up an estimate inside of QuickBooks, it allows you to pick the items, right? It allows you to add those different items to the estimate. It could be service items, non-inventory parts, inventory parts, build assemblies, whatever it is. And that way we can do the estimate versus actual at the job level and at the item level, okay? And we can even do profitability if we wanted to at the GL account code level if we needed to, and I'll show you that towards the end. So estimate is the best way to do job costing inside of QuickBooks, whether it's an internal or external project. Budget is very important to understand when we're going into any project. What is our budget, both cost and revenues wise? What are we expecting to get, right? So I'm going to set up in here. I'm just going to add a couple because I don't, you'll get the gist of it. So I have 100. Estimated cost is $25 an hour. I'm going to have 150% markup, which would be amazing. Then I'm going to do roof framing, 500 hours, and $30 an hour with 100% markup. Okay, so you guys kind of get the gist in here. Now, you don't have to do estimated cost. You don't have to do estimated revenue. If you don't have revenues on this, make the revenue 0. Right? You don't have to track both, but you have the ability to track both. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Think about being in the future. Now, once I do this, once I save this estimate in the system, what it does for me is it now throws it onto a report. So I have estimate versus actual detail report for this job. And I have my estimated cost. I have no actual cost yet. Estimated revenue, no actual revenue yet, because all I've done is built my budget by the task for this job. Now, notice how QuickBooks categorizes things in here too. So it'll categorize all my services together. It'll categorize all my inventory parts together, non-inventory parts together. So I can collapse and, come in here and say, okay, just show me service, non-inventory, inventory parts, assembly parts. So you can collapse it down if you don't want to see all the details. But this is what we're going for, right? Well, what's my estimated cost? What's my estimated revenue? Now, when it comes to items being set up in the estimate, one of the things that people miss is the setup of the item. So if I were to add a new item, and I'm just going to make it a service charge for now, you want to make sure, new labor item, you want to make sure that you are checking this silly little box that says this service is used in assemblies or is performed by a subcontractor or partner. Doesn't make sense, but what this box does is it says on a purchase transaction, hit a purchase account. On a sales transaction, hit a sales account. Okay? Because on that estimate versus actual, it's picking up estimated cost and estimated revenue. So there has to be the ability for them to decipher, to determine, right, what part of this is hitting cost and what part is hitting revenue. So it has to be double-sided, right? Called a double-sided item when you check that little itty bitty box. I wish they would just put in here the words, make this double-sided. But that allows us to point on a purchase transaction, where is it hitting? And on a sales transaction, where is it hitting? So it's a crucial part of this. Okay. You will get warnings sometimes. I know you guys have probably seen them before, where you have it not double-sided and you have it just hitting construction as an example. And you'll get a warning when you try to put this item on a bill. And it'll say, hey, this item is hitting an income account. Are you sure you want to do that? You should pay attention to those warnings. Those warnings in QuickBooks are super annoying, I know. But we should pay attention to them. Okay. All right, before I go into expense side, I do have a couple questions in here. So let me just see. I tried multiple levels, but it creates a lot of trouble when customer pays multiple invoices, levels with one check. Any thoughts on that? So, yeah. So when you can, on receive payment, you can receive payment at the job level. You can also receive payment at the customer level, and it will pick up all jobs. So anything that we have underneath is jobs. Now, credits, right? Discounts and credits. If you have a credit memo at the job level, it's expecting that you're going to use that credit memo on this job because you're putting it at the job level. So you just have to be aware of that as well. There's a feature where you can transfer credits between jobs. We have another video on that too. Added that a couple years ago. So maybe we can go through that at one point. I have a buying group for a group of customers that purchases orders. Pays as their own invoice. I want to identify these customers as part of buyer's group in QB. Parent-child customer relationship with option to not invoice the parent. Is there a way to use jobs to attend? So it sounds like to me, so somebody's asking about grouping customers together. There are ways, right, at the customer or job level to differentiate or put things together, right? So you can use customer type, you can use sales representative, custom fields, we can use job type. So there are other fields. We'd have to look at what exactly you guys are trying to do there. Okay, so let's talk about purchase transactions and jobs. So job field and class field are the two most powerful fields in QuickBooks when it comes to subledger reporting. Because if I come into my vendors, right, and I create a purchase order, as an example, I can add customer job on that PO, and it'll flow forward for me, right? One of the things, actually, let's go back to our estimate. I shouldn't have gotten off of there yet. One of the things we'll see customers do is that we will, so let's say we subcontract out our roof framing. So I'll come in here, say I need to create a purchase order for this roof framing, these 500 hours at $30 an hour. And it pulls in my customer job on here, right? So that gets pulled across. And I can save this. This is a non-posting transaction, right? Because it's a purchase order. It doesn't affect anything. But because we have these cool job costing reports, it does show up in our committed cost by job report. So if I look in here at job 1, I have committed costs of $15,000. That means I'll have it on a purchase order because a purchase order is like a contract, right? We also have our, well, it's not going to show up on our WIP. It's not going to show up on our WIP because it's estimate versus actual. But we have that picked up there, right? So I would be able to see like which, there's other reports about, you know, what are open purchase orders by job, right? So there's other reports where you'll see these kinds of things as well. But that customer job field is there, right? The customer job field has to be there in order for us to be able to report on it. Okay. When I go in and I create item receipts for this, or I enter the bill for this transaction, right? It flows across and that customer job is there. Okay, so I have it on the item receipt, I have it on the bill, I have it on both the items tab and I have it on the expense tab if I did want to go straight to a GL. It doesn't look as pretty when you're reporting. If you put it straight to a GL, it looks a lot better if you do it through an item, but it's there. Okay. If I do a check, I can post a check against a customer job, both items and expenses. I can post a credit card transaction against a customer job. So all of the purchase type transactions, anytime I'm purchasing anything, I can post that against a customer job, which allows me to be accurate in my costing, right? And all of these things, let's just do one real quick. Oops, I don't know. So I'm going to do, I don't know, somebody build masonry for some reason. We didn't have it on the estimate, right? But I'm going to build against this job and say save. When I do that and I come back to my estimate versus actual report, right? It's going to show up on here that I have an actual cost that has no estimate. So it's a trigger for me. Okay. To say, hey, I need to go back and do a change order. But the fact that it's there. The other place that it is where we might see expense transactions going in could be revenue transactions too, but it's on a journal entry. So if you put it on a journal entry, now journal entries, we don't like using them because you cannot put an item on a journal entry, but you can still put it to the customer job if you needed to. Right? We'll see a lot of times if we have payroll being run externally, we will see people put in payroll as a journal entry and still do the job costing. We actually like to do that a different way internally in our work process we teach with customers. Because if I do it as like a $0 check, or I run it as a $0 check, meaning like all of the, it runs through a WIP account, right? Like a work in process account. So the cash comes in, or the cash goes out and then all of the expenses offset that cash. We've also gone in and done the batch enter transactions. So we'll set up a credit card account called payroll clearing, and we'll paste in, right? So because journal entries you can't import without using an outside tool, or you have to use an IF file, which is not great, right? Single user mode, all the fun things. So we'll copy and paste from Excel in using credit card charges, and doing that allows us to put it to an item, right? Because we can push it to an item, we want to do that as much as possible. So we can add the customer cost on the transactions. A couple things to think about with the purchasing. If you put in a transaction and it doesn't show up on here, so if I go in and I enter a bill, here's my $15,000 bill, let me save it. And I do save a new and put in another one, and I'm just going to put it straight to an account. Let's put it to, I don't know, customer deposits. If you point it to a balance sheet account, on my estimate versus actual report, it's looking for expense accounts. So it's not going to pick it up. So if your item is not an inventory part or an assembly part, your item is like a service item, and the purchase transaction is pointing to a balance sheet account, it's not going to show up on here. It's not going to recognize it. It's looking for income and expense accounts. Okay. So of course we have expenses when it comes to projects. The other biggest, usually largest expense, right, is time. So on a timesheet, you can come in and you can allocate time against the job. Right? So when I put in my time in here, allocate against the job, timesheets are non-posting transactions. It will not actually pick up that cost against the job until you process payroll. But the fact that we can put in a timesheet in here allows us, again, to go to that committed cost by job report and see if we have any unpaid wages tied to this job. Right, so again, it's a non-posting transaction. And once we run payroll, it'll become actual cost. But labor can be costed. Time cards, right? Time cards lead to payroll, and that can be costed against a job. Then when we talk about the revenue section, I'm running up against time, I only have 3 minutes here, oh my gosh. Talk about the revenue section. What drives revenue, right? So a journal entry could drive revenue, but it won't tie it to an item. Journal entry could drive revenue against the job. Most of the time, it's going to be an invoice or a credit memo, which would be contra revenue, right? Or a sales receipt. So those type of transactions drive revenue. So if I have my estimate in here and I say, okay, I'm going to create my invoice. I'm going to do it for 25% of my job and say save. Then when I go into my estimate versus actual, I now see estimated costs, actual costs, estimated revenue, actual revenue, okay? The other thing that you have in here, so I didn't talk about this yet, but I just want to show it real quick, is the job WIP summary, which is great because it shows you estimated cost, actual cost, percentage complete, estimated revenue, earned revenue, right, based on ASC 606, I think is what it is, where it says, okay, I estimate 17,000. I have actual cost of 15,000, so I'm 90% there on cost. So therefore, I should be recognizing 90.29% of my revenue. So that's my earned revenue, whether or not that's how much I've actually invoiced, right? Because I've only invoiced 9,000. I've earned 32,000. So this is where I pick up my deferred revenue, which we'll talk about in another meeting. Okay. Up against time. Hopefully you guys got some nuggets from here. I would love, again, I'd love to hear how people are doing things. right? Using the system to track the things that they need, even though they're not necessarily in that industry or, never thought I'd need job costing. Job costing is very, very powerful, super powerful for people to use. So we have some stuff coming up. We've got work in process. So job WIP, we talked about that a little bit today, but we'll go more in depth around things like that. We've got customer deposits video coming up, retainage, some more inventory stuff. We do have some WebGility videos coming up. One of the things I like, again, same thing. Knowledge is power. You can do things in WebGility or using WebGility that sometimes we would have to consider a custom application to do. Like WebGility has the ability to do automatic build assemblies, make build assemblies automatically happen. So it's good information to watch them, even if you don't think you need a web store. It's pretty powerful stuff. So check it out. As always, right, we're just trying to get you guys data to make decisions in your business in a timely manner. And that's all I got for you guys today. All right, I'm going to look through a couple of these questions. So Connie asked about, can you import a job budget estimate from Excel? So they don't have copy and paste for estimates right now, but if you needed to, we do have, a lot of our clients use Transaction Pro Importer. So if you have it in Excel, it's a really immaterial cost, a couple $100, and we just need to set up a one-time mapping, and you can import those in. Also, our company, obviously we do custom development work, so if you're using an outside quoting tool that does not already connect to QuickBooks and you want that to be automated, that's something that we can build. We do that quite frequently for people. Hopefully that answers your question, Connie. Let's see. All the questions I see in here today. All right, guys. I don't see anything else coming in, so I will see you all next week. Thanks, everybody.